You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's way more than that. So,
But people would say, like, be honest, like, Yayo really became the face of
he
Fort
is
Worth.
absolutely no.
I
There's
don't
no
know
doubt about it.
And it's not taking anything from like Twisted Black. And I do have to counter you. You are starting to sound like the old man in the room.
Hell yeah.
Because I mean, same thing when I interviewed Big Chief. Big Chief was talking about all the things that they did in their time. Okay, that's cool. Definitely trailblazers, but that time is up.
For sure.
And it's a younger generation. I mean, even, you know what I'm saying? Like, you look at what Go Yayo did and what Preem them were able to do with Go Yayo and how it highlighted Fort Worth. Like, Go Yayo, when you saw him on Vlad and you saw him on DJ Small Eyes, he
fucking
was
50 Cent was posting about him. Yeah, like
this was the face of Fort Worth. I think for a lot of people, especially if you're talking Black Instagram, Black Twitter, hip hop wise, Go Yayo was the face of Fort Worth. And behind Go Yayo, a movement came. You start to see Bugatti Casino. You start to see Lil CJ. You know what I'm saying? Like, all the things that got out of that movement. So I can see why Go Yayo was the poster of it. Now,
For sure.
I do hear a lot of people saying that the scene is dead only because now you really don't have that mainstay artists that say this is Fort Worth and this is, you know what I'm saying, this is Dallas. Like, you got a lot of artists doing their thing.
Yeah.
But when you think of Fort Worth, unfortunately, I mean, I ain't gonna say unfortunately, but people just still think Go Yayo.
Correct.
And Go Yayo, unfortunately, because he is locked up, he hasn't been able to drop anything new. You know CJ, you know Bugatti. It's a lot of people doing their thing, but you don't have that main artist that's popping nationwide out of Fort Worth.
I think with Yayo though, I think he was such an exception. You know, like I may have told this to him before, but I feel like what he did and what he was able to accomplish, he really did it blindfolded. You know, like, it wasn't like he went in with an intent. He was strategic. He just dropped
And it lined up
caught
for
fire. And it caught fire. And that's just what you call the it factor. You know what I'm saying? He just had the it factor. And you're right, you know, because now we're in 2022. So this isn't, you know, when he came out in 2014, 2015, I don't remember.
Yeah, that's almost a decade ago.
You know what I'm saying?
Almost.
So, like, he's the OG to the young generation. So
Yep.
these new young guys, I see some of the young Mexican kids, some of the young Black kids, they're still emulating what he's done.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, when it's all said and done, when you look at the history of Worth Hiphop, he's probably going to go down as the GOAT or one of the GOATs. There's no denying that. And, you know, and you got to respect that. You know what I'm saying? But I will say that, to your point, maybe right now there's not that mainstay. Maybe right now there's not that face of hip-hop per se amongst the viral community, right? Because that viral community is still like how people measure who's doing what. And I mean, I still think there's so many layers that make a successful artist. It's not just a viral success. It's also their box office reports. It's also what they're doing on merchandising. It's also just the overall perspective of what they're doing streaming, what they're doing here, what they're doing there, to really measure the overall impact of an effective artist.
Yeah.
But I think with Fort Worth, you see people that do it in bits and pieces. You see someone that might do really good on YouTube, but might not do good, you know, live shows.
For sure.
Yeah, or they might not do have a strong presence on streaming platforms, or whatever the case may be. So because of that, I can understand why people would assume that it's dead per se, but I just think it's a matter of time. It's like any other scene. It's going to take a minute before you start getting somebody else to come in that could really do that. And I don't necessarily think it's dead versus because there's people doing it. To me, dead is just like no life whatsoever. You know?
Think what we're doing is we're comparing it to markets, right?
For sure.
We're saying dead versus look at what Atlanta is able to do. Mm-hmm. They have a movement. Look at what Chicago has on the drill scene. They have a movement. Look at what Detroit has. They have a movement. You look at what New York is doing. They resurging with the whole New York drill, that Euro drill type of music. They resurging. The West Coast has their thing. But when you look at Dallas and Fort Worth, it's almost like it's still compared to those scenes. If you're comparing it, it seems like you almost feel like you're alive and you got momentum, and then now I feel like we back to trying to figure out who's next up again.
Yeah, for sure.
And you don't have that mainstay artist. And I think that's what people are comparing it to as far as saying it's dead. It's not that people not working and not trying to make things happen. It just still, unfortunately, wherever it may be, it's just not an artist that's representing the Metroplex.
And I don't know that there'll ever
level.
be a point in time where it'll be fully mainstream per se, but you'll definitely have an artist that I think will come along soon that'll do really well. And it's just, maybe that happens now, maybe that happens 5 years down the line, but it'll happen. Historically, it's happened before, which is what I'm trying to get to with. I'm not trying to sound like the dinosaur, like, oh, once upon a time there was a guy named Twisted Black or 6'2" and this group and that group, but there's a history, right? And I know that a lot of people have selective memory when they talk about where the scene started.
I don't even think it's about. I get what you're saying as far as some people think, but people only going to stay at the moment of their hype.
For sure, absolutely. But when I'm looking at the whole picture, there is a history beyond that. You know what I mean? And I think there's going to be a history after that, like after everything that we just talked about. All these guys that have come in, some of these guys have lasted. Some of these guys aren't as hot as they used to be. Some of these guys are no longer commodities. Everybody has a run. And whenever the run is up, there's nothing wrong with it being up because you had a run.
Because you got to think, Go Yayo crew are now hitting their 30s.
Yeah. They're OGs. They're OGs is what it is now.
And that's what happened. Hip-hop is still in the phase where the youth determine what's cool.
For sure.
And youth don't look at history. They're about what's happening now. What's popping right now is cool, not what used to pop. They don't care about what's going to pop. It's what's cool right now, and it evolved with that. And so I think the reason why you're not going to get too, unless you're just a DFW hip-hop historian, connoisseur, or just loving hip-hop music in general, those are the people who respect and enjoy past music. But when you're just a fan in the moment, and you're making music in the moment, you're not going to care about what's the past.
Correct. And to your point, I've said this before, never in my lifetime, I grew up in the 90s, never in my lifetime did I ever think that there would be a point in time where people would actually question Michael Jordan's greatness.
Yeah.
And, now we're in 2022 and people are really comparing him to LeBron James, right? Or vice versa, LeBron James to him.
Yeah.
And whatever, people can state that opinion all day, every day, but I just never once in my wildest dreams would think, wow, you guys are really going to make the argument that Jordan wasn't as great as he was. Oh man, he played against plumbers and he played against this. I'm like, what the fuck are you talking about? You know what I mean?
But everybody always think their personal generation was better.
Correct. And
that's
I
what's
think
going to go
it's just
down.
the era that we're in, right? Everybody's era comes in thinking that they were greater than the one before them. And
20 years from now, somebody's going to say the same thing about LeBron. And Jordan's going to be, you and I don't talk about Dr. J.
Yeah, for sure.
But that was Michael Jordan. Michael Jordan was Dr. J. But he's so far in the past that his name doesn't come up.
Yeah,
and I think in 20 years from now, it's going to be the same way with Jordan name as far as in the basketball conversation.
So I think it's like that in every scene.
Every scene.
Every scene, you know what I mean? There's guys that I look up to that I've admired, that I love, whether it be in hip hop or in R&B. And it's like the older that I'm getting, the more I'm realizing that they don't mean anything to this new generation.
No,
you know
absolutely.
what I mean? But understanding that. So I think all of that to say, Supreme is a gatekeeper. He's not wrong, but I don't necessarily always agree with the perspective that the Fort Worth music scene is dead. I think it's alive. It's just where you're going. And it's also a matter of who is next, right?
Yeah.
And I think because he's played such a part and so many of these younger guys take it off, and there's nobody taking off, he feels he's responsible for that. You know what I'm saying?
No,
and
absolutely.
There's nothing wrong with that. That's pretty accurate, if you must say, but there is other people making moves and making things happen, and it's not just based off of what you can do for artists. It's also like, artists that are from this point to the next step point. It's also what you can do here. And I think that's the point to any artist, right? We talk about what makes an artist impactful. It's not just one piece of the pie; it's multiple pieces of the pie. Same thing with the gatekeeper list.
No,
right?
absolutely.
Like, you're just not a gatekeeper by getting somebody signed or getting a guy to have a healthy YouTube channel. That doesn't define a gatekeeper, or a mover, a shaker, or someone that can impact your career. It's somebody that might be able to do something that has nothing to do with what you even think or deem to be important. So